All right, I am live. Let me make sure this is set. And we are here for the Mental Health Unscripted chat, where we talk about different mental health stuff. And I do respond to the chat as the first priority. I'm even going to try to learn the pin thing of like pinning the comment that I'm responding to on the top of the board, which makes hopefully people feel more special, but also have a better focus for stuff. So, it, and by the way, I want to say about ambiguity, I can't guarantee any anonymous ambiguity. There's always ambiguity in life. My brain is not functioning right now. Anyway, anonymity and confidentiality. I can't guarantee confidentiality, so do ask questions vaguely or be okay with the fact that your stuff might be out there. Of course, you can always do the technique that nobody knows how to see through, which is asking for a friend. If you say asking for a friend, everyone assumes that it's a friend and not you. So that's just a little tip. But anyway, this is Father's Day, so again, we'll go wherever we want to go with the chat. But I figured I might as well start a little bit with talking about masculinity, femininity, manhood, and what I see that as. Hello, welcome. Thanks for starting off for the chat. So, I was raised in a Christian household, and my dad had this book, Raising the Modern Day Knights, that talked about the four cornerstones of being a man. And let's see if I can remember them. They were accept responsibility, lead courageously, reject passivity, and look for the greater reward in heaven. And I think those are good principles. So I think those are good principles for humanity in general. Of course, Jung talks about how every man has an enema, and that's not something that you stick up your butt. That is rather this anima, Anima, I think is how you spell it, but it's the feminine side. So when we talk about getting in touch with our feminine side, that's actually a Jungian perspective. So a man, it might be masculine, but he has a feminine side. And of course, the reverse is true as well. A woman is feminine, but has a masculine side. Now, I personally think, and I think this is kind of obvious in the nature of things, that masculinity and femininity are in some ways spectrums, that we have some people that are much more masculine and much more comfortable in the masculine energy and very uncomfortable in the feminine energy. And then we have some people that are more comfortable in the feminine energy and have a hard time in the masculine. Of course, you could think of these as different playgrounds because some people are comfortable in both. They're comfortable doing the stuff that are considered more masculine or more feminine. I was raised by my dad, who probably might be watching. Who knows? Sometimes watches this. Happy Father's Day, Dad. I'll call you after the call. I did text him, but I didn't actually call him yet. But anyway, he is a wrestler. He grew up in a pretty strict, a pretty harsh environment. Detroit, murder capital of the world. No, maybe not. I don't think the world. The United States at the time. But anyway, and there was some rough and tough parts of his upbringing, but he never lost his ability to be sensitive, to feel. Crying at Hallmark commercials, I feel like is one of the things that I got from him. And so he was able to say, I love you. He was able to be emotional. He was able to cry. And that was all very helpful. Energy is eternal. I'm not sure what it has to do with the part of the chat, but sometimes there's a lag. So sometimes it's hard to know what somebody's responding to. But I see the comment, energy is eternal. Which is true. Scientifically, energy is never increasing nor decreasing. So some things get lost in transferring of energy, but energy itself does not increase nor decrease. So energy is what science can see that is eternal. But anyway, masculine and feminine energies. So, my dad's masculine energy had some anger to it, for sure, has some, less and less. That came, I think, from a product of some wounds and traumas and childhood stuff. But his main masculine energy was that of self-sacrificing, leading courageously, well, like the four cornerstones, right? He accepted responsibility when it came to our family and providing, and his life, his job, all of it. Like, he, as a gym teacher with elementary school kids, really took on that as more than just a job to perform, but a responsibility to honor when it came to those kids. Rejected passivity. I don't think my dad's ever been passive. In fact, there's many times, even in the Christian churches and communities, that he's stood up and said, wait, what are we doing exactly? Because this doesn't sound like a good idea, right? If he sees something, in fact, actually, one of the things I will say that my dad is worse at, is one of the hardest things for him, is when he sees injustice and knows it's not actually his place to do anything, to just let it go. He has a really hard time letting things go like that. So he accepts responsibility, rejects passivity, leads courageously, led our family. Anyway, and often was looking for the greater reward in the long term. So I grew up with this idea of the masculine energy, and that was relatively positive. I did see in the wrestling community some really great men that were ultra competitive, that their egos showed up, and there was some negativity to that. So I'm not even saying that in my childhood it was all positive with men and masculinity and father figures and stuff like that. Because I never liked that. I never liked the big ego that I saw with some of these wrestlers. And now I'm talking about wrestlers that a lot of them, like some of them, were in the Olympics. I mean, and don't get me wrong, there were some that were very humble, but there were some that put their ego on the line too much. I do think that can be something that can be a more masculine trait. Not that women don't have it, but I think it's still a masculine trait. All that to say, there was none of this alpha male stuff. And the alpha male stuff really comes from a misunderstanding. So they did wolf studies. It's from wolf examinations. And at first there was this idea that the front wolf was the leader of the pack. I don't know if anybody knows that song with the leader of the pack. It was an old, maybe 50s song. The leader of the pack, vroom, vroom. Man, I'm trying to remember the lyrics now, and I can get distract myself, but it's a very dramatic song that's kind of telling a story. I'm going to listen to that after the stream probably again, because it's been years. But anyway, the real thing of alpha males were actually the wolf that walked behind, because it's the one that's making sure all of the other wolves are safe. So if wolves are in the pack, the one in front is not actually the leader most of the time. It's actually the alpha in the back. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." Yeah, well, coming from another man that has a hard time seeing things that are unjust and walking away. And that's part of an archetype, right? The warrior for justice, the term when you're not a police officer, vigilante kind of thing. That's shows up in society a lot, especially with people that experience, and it's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean it's an entanglement, just because it's often heavily influenced by seeing a lot of injustice when you're a kid and vulnerable and can't defend yourself, and then growing up learning to be strong enough. And basically, this is basically Batman. So what I'm basically saying is the person that just commented and my dad are Batman. Not the worst parallel. I am what I am. You are whatever you yam. If you yam, that's what you are. That's what the person just commented. Might have meant I am what I am, but who knows? Knowing him, it could be yam. Anyway, I met him at the candy store. He turned around and looked at me. Oh, that's the. I was like, is this a story about my dad or the other guy who's commenting right now? But no, that's the song. Man, the song. And now I'm trying to remember the melody for that part. I know it's the sing song, like kind of talk part when it's the. At the candy store, he turned around and looked at me, the leader of the pack. Vroom, vroom. Yeah, but anyway, get the picture. Yes, we see that's why I felt for the leader of the fact. I think she meant pact. Yes, we see that's why I felt for. Yeah, and so that can also be when it comes to what attracts us in partners. Yeah, it's interesting because they say birds of a feather flock together and opposites attract, and these are both true. And often when it looks like there's two things that are contradicting when it comes to studying human behavior, we just need to look a little closer. And if we get a little more specific, we see what's going on. So energetically, you have that magnet effect where one can pull towards another and then they bond really closely. And there's a theory out there that like narcissists and codependents bond together with this kind of magnetism. So some people that are people pleasers are naturally drawn, and it makes sense if you think about it, to someone who's going to be very demanding because there's a book, and I'm not recommending the book, but it's called Existential Kink. And in it, it talks about how even these negative things are something that we want to do. The author uses the thing of we love it, right? Like someone who complains all the time doesn't want their life to get better. They actually enjoy and love to complain, and they want to complain, right? The person that is, according to this book now, because I'm gonna use disclaimer. I'm gonna hopefully improve, I think, on the picture that this book is painting, making it a little more accurate. But according to the book, what they talk about is how you might want to be abused. That's like that other song that some of them want to abuse you. Some of them want to be abused. I don't forget that melody. But anyway, and it is true to a point. I think it's a little dangerous territory using the word want and desire for negative experiences, because again, I think we could be more clear and specific. I think we can be more precise with our speech. The existential part, by the way, is philosophically purpose-driven, like what we are pulled to and our identity. And the kink, of course, is like fetish, kink, things that we pleasure in that we know we're not supposed to. So that's what the book is kind of talking about. Whether we get some sense of pleasure from it or not kind of depends on the way that we frame it. It is a compulsion, it is a drive, right? So even when somebody experiences trauma, there is a part of them that if they don't process that trauma, which parts of their brain doesn't want to process the trauma because it doesn't want to think about it, but other parts know it needs to process the trauma. And those parts that really feel like they need to process the trauma will then replay it out in other scenarios in their lives. So they will like find ways to have that drama reoccur. This is like the Jung quote that I often reference. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it'll drive your life and you'll call it fate. So you can have this, yeah, that's right. Sweet dreams are made of these. Who am I to disagree? And actually, in terms of those dreams, whether sweet or nightmaric, hey, thanks for the like. I got a like somewhere. It's the same thing with our dreams. So our dreams replay and reprocess, especially pieces of information that we can't quite fit into our purpose, existential worldview, and ways of operating in the world. So trauma often, because it's trauma for a reason, like it's a reason that we take it as traumatic, is because it's this event that's not only negative, not only extreme, but different than the norm. And so all of a sudden it stands out, and there's a part of our brain that is trying to process it, and another part of it that finds it unpleasant to talk about. So we don't know where to put it. And we'll dream about it. We will play it out in our subconscious behaviors. We will find ways of exploring and examining this thing, and it can turn into kinks and fetishes. It can turn into toxic relationships. It can turn into all of these different behaviors. Again, I wouldn't, I disagree with the book on many levels. One is that I don't think it's accurate to say that we want or enjoy doing it. But this is sometimes one of the reasons why we find ourselves doing the things that we don't want to do, right? And what we do want to do, we don't do. It's like, let's get more specific and look at it very closely. And if we do, we'll probably find out that there's a part of us that really does want to do this thing, or is drawn to it, or is trying to process it. And another part of us is preventing that from happening in a way that's healthy. So we've got no option but turning into a way that's not healthy. And I still preach, and I actively give sermons, did this Sunday. And, I talked about awareness and walking into authenticity, and how difficult that experience is, how denial is objectively easier, and, it feels psychologically safer to be in denial. So when we are trying to deal with some things and process in awareness, we have to expect resistance. There's a part of us that is going to push away from that. And so that's one of the things that is really difficult in this process of becoming whole and the best version of yourself, in healing our traumas, in becoming more aware of who we are, because we are at war with ourselves in that process. Now, it's like, I'll be honest, this is a conversation I had with ChatGPT. I do not recommend using ChatGPT as a source, but it can be helpful for me to play off of. So I'm actually challenging ChatGPT a lot of the time. I'm testing it. I'm having it test me. And so if you just use ChatGPT as it's designed, it's just going to tell you exactly what you want to hear. But you can actually do it in a way that it's challenging, giving you different perspectives and things to think about, and kind of a self-journaling and using it as a prompt. Okay? So that's the caveat here. But in talking with ChatGPT, I was mentioning how ego is the enemy, and it's pushing back at that, saying that we shouldn't see ego as our enemy, because it sees enemies as something that we should try to hurt and harm. But that's not biblically, and my perspective on how we should treat enemies. You love your enemies, right? You are trying to create a new friend. Like, in some ways, it's like, if you can take your enemy and make him into your friend, then you have an ally that can be very helpful. And it's the same way with our inner parts of us. If it's sure, there's resistance. Sure, there's parts of ourselves that we don't like. And sure, in many senses, yes, they are our enemies, even though they're us. Because they're at war with the direction that we ultimately want to go when we want to do what matters and live our values. So we're trying to process this. With all that said, as we are trying to figure out how to be the best version of ourselves, starting to figure out how we can win over, befriend, understand, and love our enemies internally is also a very helpful thing. So seeing these different parts of us that are at war, getting to be have a better understanding and a dialogue between them is something that's very helpful. And sometimes that can help because it all gets confusing when you realize it's all you. It's like they talk about in the dream that it's all you, like everyone in your dream is kind of you at the same time. Okay, I don't know why the reference to "We Ain't Nothing But Mammals," so let's do it like they do on the Discovery Channel. That's the song that he's referencing. There is a delay, so sometimes it's hard to know. Like, I'm sure I said a line that made him think of that. One of my nicknames, I guess, or one of the many personalities that I take on is Bumblebee. So I often think of like songs and relate things to music. And now it's becoming like part of the chat language. I kind of love it. But anyway, I mean, that could be a part of us that we don't like, a part of us that we wish we could control, the id, as Freud talks about it, the one that's got that drive towards pursuing the flesh, as some might say. But anyway, but even that, it's like we flee from temptation, but not the engine of temptation. We flee from we talk often at this channel about the shadow, the parts of ourselves that we don't like, that we shove into the subconscious. Embracing and incorporating the shadow. I think we talked about this last time I did a chat, which was that last week. It's been a busy week, so a very eventful, very good, positive week, but very eventful week. Anyway, we did talk about the what did we talk about? The shadow, and incorporating it doesn't mean that you give into it. Doesn't mean that you let it do whatever it wants to do. It means that you understand it and you incorporate it in a way that fits into your values, right? So it doesn't mean like, oh, good, this, I can unleash the dark side and then expect that my life is going to get better, right? I can unleash the beast. And going all the way back to where we started the chat with talking about masculinity, it's like I can just fight and push and punch and it's all good. There cannot be a shadow without light. Commenter said, there cannot be a shadow without a light. Yeah, and so like these parts of ourselves that we might see as the shadow are connected to the part of ourselves that are light. And honestly, like some of the things that everybody hates about themselves are so intimately interwoven with the things that they love about themselves that they don't want to get rid of. Like one of the things that it's really helpful to process through when somebody is mad at themselves for, let's say, people pleasing, right? To see that there's a part of themselves that's empathic, understanding, and loving. There's a part of themselves that connects so deeply to people, and they don't really want to lose that part of themselves. There was a hypnotherapist who I met, and he was saying how he had 100% recovery rate. And I was already like, oh, that's a little sus. 100% recovery from everything, giving up smoking, losing weight, all this stuff. Yeah, it's too good to be true. What's the asterisk? What's the caveat? And sure enough, later, it was a radio interview, but later he revealed the truth. He said, well, there's one caveat. As long as they are 100% ready to be rid of that action. It's like, oh, okay, well, then you did nothing. Then you're not helpful at all, because any behavior that we are ready to be done with and we 100% don't like, we never struggle with again. We don't have to read a book about it. We don't have to talk to a therapist. We don't have to go to self-help stuff. If we 100%, if every single ounce of us, if everything in our being, if every different personality and identities, has in us, subconsciously and consciously wants to be done with an action, we don't struggle with it. The reality is change is more complicated because there's a part of us that clings to it. There's a part of us that we want to keep, that's tied to that behavior. So all of these things are all connected together. And when we look at that, we can sometimes be a lot more specific and see what exactly we want to reframe, what exactly we want to process through, right? And so that can be really helpful in the process of therapy, because as we're going through these struggles and figuring out how we can be the best version of ourselves, understanding creates more transformation than any kind of other motivator. Fear, compulsion, consequences, force, any of those things don't actually produce as long-term benefits. Now there's I'll admit an asterisk to that too, right? So the asterisk is short-term. We can, out of fear, make changes, and that does work, right? But long term, it's almost like it's like from a movie or something where it talks about how if you're ruling by fear, you are just going to create enough obedience that while you're watching, they do what you ask them to, but you won't actually have their loyalty, right? And I'm not talking about, to be clear, primarily how we orient ourselves in society and the world, but our own self, right? So this is all internal family systems therapy stuff where we see the different parts of ourselves and we see that there are no bad parts, which is the main book of internal family systems therapy, is No Bad Parts. And so all of these different aspects of our life and our shadow are actually well-designed parts that might have gotten a little entangled or twisted, right? They might be going in a wrong direction, but that doesn't mean they're not something redeemable. They're not something good. So as we process all of that stuff, I'm going to go step a little back, circle back to this stuff that I talked about at the beginning of the hour. Unless we got more questions in chat, so keep them coming, please. But all that to say, in terms of masculine and feminine energy, I think that there is, unfortunately, in society, that battle of the sexes perspective, that it can be this great divide between masculine and feminine in a way that is unnecessary. And when we're looking at even ourselves again with the enema and animus, with the masculine side and the feminine side, when we are integrated, which is a lot of the goal of therapy, we see these things as working well together. They can work well in relationships. My parents just celebrated their 50th anniversary actually this last week, so that's why the week was a very busy week for me, very positive but very busy, because I was out with the family celebrating. We had this big reunion. And in their 50 years of marriage, it's my mom does have feminine energy. My dad does have masculine energy, and the way that they've worked together, even in their parenting, that's probably the most impressive thing. Speaking of Father's Day, my dad had, and I know this isn't the way every family works. Let me be clear. And as I said earlier, I know that there are women that are have more masculine energy, and people that are men that have more feminine energy. And that's fine, right? There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But my mom, who, is a strong woman, has feminine energy. And feminine energy can be very strong, by the way. My dad, who can cry and has his feminine side that he is in touch with, does have a lot of very strong masculine energy. Actually, my dad was a dancer. So even though I do talk more about the wrestling aspect of his life, he actually danced at the University of Michigan. And there was a lot of people that thought he was gay, as dancers usually are. But I think that's interesting to me because, there are, of course, masculine gay people. But I'm just saying, watching my dad, he dances like a man. Like even when he's doing modern dance, but it's like, you know, it's very like strong, decisive, aggressive movements, beautiful, but very like, you know, I don't know. He's like a ninja on the dance floor. Maybe a little bit less so that he's in his 70s now, but still a little bit like a ninja. All that to say, that masculine energy was how he led, and he led sacrificially. And you know, everybody can have different kinds of relationships. I use this a metaphor sometimes for how you go through life. Is that in life you go through mud sometimes, right? There you see that there's this nasty mud in front of you, and you've got a few options. You could have the one person carry the other, right? You could trade off who's carrying who. Of course, that kind of seems a little silly because it's not easy to carry someone and you're both going to get muddy anyway. Or you can walk through it together. Now, if you walk through it together, you're both going to get muddy, but you can go at your own pace and nobody has to carry anyone. The one thing that I don't think works in relationships is when one person is carrying the other person and the person being carried is the one trying to bark orders at where they go and how fast they go, but they're not actually carrying not only the other person's weight, they're not even carrying their own weight. That to me doesn't work in relationships. Oh, I got another like. Thank you for whoever did the like. Please keep the chat coming, by the way. Keep your questions coming in the chat. So that's like relationships where there's some people that like one person is in the lead, they're taking charge, they're the one, you know, and hopefully either way it's a partnership, right? My mom does so much work. It's not like my dad did more because he definitely didn't do less, right? They shared the load. In you know, my parents' particular relationship, his leadership was sacrificial. He was going through the mud, carrying the family, right, and putting that as his first priority. So an example that I use that is maybe very small and simple is that of movie night. So our family loved movies. We watched movies pretty much every Friday night at a certain point, and we would choose together what movie we're going to watch. Now there was 4 boys that were my brothers, my dad, and my mom. Sometimes I got another like. Thank you guys. Thanks for the likes. Still haven't gotten more questions though. Keep the questions coming. Okay, so sometimes the kids would get to choose. So the brothers and I, right? The movies we wanted to watch. Say we wanted to watch Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Sometimes we'd get to watch what mom wanted to watch, which, you know, was probably natural disaster movies, to be honest. That's kind of my mom's main thing. Or more like chick flicks. She does like some of those too. But it wasn't until years later that I knew how much my dad loved cowboy movies. And now when he's often watching stuff on his own, it's almost always a cowboy movie. Right? If in every movie, this is how dad measures a movie on whether it's good or not. If it's got horses, and horses, it's a good movie. If it doesn't, it's not a good movie. Okay. So that's kind of my dad's attitude. All that to say is when he chose every Friday, we did not vote. There was no system. It is my dad's choice. He's the leader of the family. He's going to choose even the movies that we watch. That was how my family worked. He never picked cowboy movies. He never picked what he wanted to watch. He picked sometimes what he thought was best for the family, what the brothers wanted to do, what his wife wanted to do, but it was never about him and his needs first. Now, my mom, being that very gentle nurturer, was going to make sure that his needs were met. But my dad's priority and focus was on sacrifice. And so, you know, while actually, I recently had a situation where from my perspective, think that there's this very wonderful feminine woman who is in this relationship with a guy who's very masculine but very controlling and manipulative of that. And it's like I can see the future played out. I can see how at a certain point this person is probably the woman is probably going to get hurt, at least have a very terrible relationship, and it's going to get worse and worse. And it's sad because I know that the reaction, understandably, the defense mechanism factor is eventually going to play out, and it's going to go, okay, this submission doesn't work. This feminine doesn't work. I need to be more comfortable in my masculine energy. And then we get more guarded and we get defended. And sometimes it's what we have to do, right? Like we have to adapt. There's a reason that we were built with these adaptive mechanisms. That self-defense stuff does not help us in the long term, but surviving certain moments, we have to do it. The problem is that we don't know how to unlearn those habits once we've learned them. And then we go on carrying that guardedness in all of our relationships to our hindrance in the future. And it's really sad. So I say all that to say that I'm glad that we have, as a society, started to address more and more toxic masculinity. I think that's a good thing. I got another thumb up. Thank you, guys. I think that we need to continue to caution toxic masculinity. I think we should teach more and teach to caution toxic femininity, because femininity can be just as toxic. It's not as obvious because masculine, when it's toxic, is very violent, aggressive, in your face, angry. Those things are much easier to spot than toxic femininity. But all that to say, we also need to honor and probably should more focus on embracing healthy masculinity and talking about what healthy masculinity looks like. The idea of sacrificer, the idea of provider. I watched, I'll be honest, not even the whole video of this video that talked about Aragorn from Lord of the Rings as a good example of true healthy masculinity. Now, sure, in a kind of knight in shining armor fantasy world, but still grounded in good values and principles. Okay, we got a question. What are your thoughts on the Hindu Brahman, which is the source of all reality and transcends any form of gender? Okay. So it's been a little while since I've studied Hinduism specifically. So I do remember Brahman. I do remember aspect of, I guess, them would be the pronoun if they transcend any form of gender. But here's the thing that's interesting about Hinduism is technically a religion, but it's kind of this collage of religions. So basically, what Hinduism does is it incorporates all of these different ideas. And if there's like another god, this is why Christian missionaries had a really hard time in India, because people that are Hindu go, okay, cool, we add Jesus too. That's not at all how they talk. I don't know why I said it like that, but yeah, we'll add Jesus to the mix, right? So it's got a lot of ideas. Some of these ideas are interesting, but they often conflict with each other and don't necessarily make a lot of sense together, because that's not really the point of Hinduism. So I feel like you're on a theme here with the energy is never increasing nor decreasing. You said that earlier. And then talking about Brahman, because that the reality that transcends any form of gender is kind of like our energy. to think about, right? That flows in everything. It exists. We light the world with it. It's never increasing nor decreasing. Like there's something there, right? When it comes to Hinduism, my perspective, and this is only my perspective, is it's very much like mythology. Mythology is also, by the way, super contradicting. So like we tend to want in today's society the story, right? Who is this character? And I was actually just watching a Jungian or listening to a Jungian podcast about Cassandra, who exists in mythology. And in mythology, Cassandra is given prophecy, but with a caveat because she makes a deal with a god that then she backs out on. And so the caveat is that she's going to know what's going to happen, but no one's going to listen to her. So it's kind of this idea of this tension of intuitively foreknowing something that we can't do anything to prevent, which is another thing that's very frustrating and kind of where I get stuck with the injustice thing. Okay, I have a new client and he tells me to call him Baba. I'm pretty sure he's Hindu. Interesting. Have you asked him if he's Hindu? Is Baba his name or his nickname? I wonder what Baba means. I'll be honest, I don't know. But anyway, the Cassandra thing is, it's mythology, right? So there's gods and there's other mythologies that it might even contradict some of these stories. And that's okay, because the idea in mythological religions is not a literal thing. It's about a tension of wrestling with a concept, wrestling with the truth. So it's about understanding. And we live in a very scientific driven world. We think of things as, binary. So like even this computer, it runs on binary. So it's ones and zeros, everything, right? The matrix, ones and zeros, the code. That's the man's world. There's actually no line in nature. I sound like such a hippie right now, but that's okay. There's no such thing as a line in nature. A line is a manufactured, man-made, man thought of concept, okay, of this perfect line. I remember when I first watched the movie Arrival, and I'm hoping to watch that again soon with some friends. I love that movie. I remember when I realized this movie was going to be great. And it was when there was a close-up on the spaceship of this alien invasion. So that's what the story is about in Arrival, the arrival of aliens on the planet and what that means for civilization and whether they mean to be friends or a threat. Of course, what actually the story is really about is when we respond to an arrival of a trauma, an alien, to our worldview and understanding perspective and how to deal with those things. And the answer, which I'm not going to give away the actual movie, but philosophically, what it's actually trying to say with all of it is to, rather than looking at life in a linear way, seeing it as a big picture thing. It's a really deep philosophical movie. Lots to say about life. And I have a very life. I mean, actually, it's my number one movie for, not my favorite, but like movies that that actually change the way that you live, that change your life. That movie changed my life. Watching that movie changed the way that I look at my life. But all that to say, when the alien ship was a close-up and it looked not like a perfect line, but more like something organic, that it had texture to the spaceship. And I was like, oh man, they thought about this. They thought about what an advanced society would actually create and build. And they had it build it more like nature is built, which is brilliant, working with and joining to nature rather than as we build, which is trying to have this idea of the perfect, this idea of the linear, the fixed, right? And so when we as man, this is the irony, okay? So I think this is actually kind of brilliant here, if we understand this, man's ideal is a simplification of nature. And I would say a corruption of it. I would say what nature is way more perfectly designed. And yet we are convinced that we're actually, while we're simplifying it, we convince that we're actually improving on it, but we're not. We're actually diminishing it, right? So our idea of perfect is this line, but it's actually worse. It's less well made than nature's design. So trees are actually much more my speech is not well designed, but the trees are much better designed than the line that we would build. And you can see, I mean, like my friend actually who commented here also said to me recently that about how much most human creation will not last, like 15, 20 years. You don't keep up with your house even, and it's going to be greatly diminished. It might still be there. There might be elements of your house that will be there, but it's going to be decapitated. Like there's not much left of it. But nature, while it's going to recycle, the energy is never going to be increasing or decreasing. The beauty is never going to be increasing and decreasing. It's going to be adapting. It's going to be flowing. It's going to still exist. Nature is far more resilient. It's better designed. And so what we are trying to do in our life with this mental health perspective is in some ways trying to like more get aligned, in touch, in flow with the nature of ourselves, rather than at war as we try to make our personality fit into a box. We try to make nature fit into a straight line when it's not supposed to. I'm kind of getting all philosophical today and out on a tangent. I hope some of you are following me and this is good, but I'm not getting a lot of questions in the chat. So this is what you got today with what I have to offer. So I hope there's some that you're gaining from it for somebody out there in the dark. But yeah, so like we paint our self-identity with these simple brushes. And so ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, is trying to get us to be psychologically flexible. It's trying to get us to say, let's stop looking at ourself as this content, I am A, I am B, right? But rather as context, flowing, psychologically flexible, have different aspects. And some of this will seem like contradictions. That's unavoidable. And when we look closer, we can better understand how it actually all fits together and works. And, you know, one of the things that I would say is, and this is why even bad therapy, now there's harmful therapy, right? But even bad therapy works. Even therapy where the therapist is basically just having a good conversation with the person, being witness to them, maybe validating them, will actually actually produce positive results. And if the person does enough of that therapy, will actually make a difference. It's really slow going, but the reason is because if we give all the aspects of ourselves enough attention, they will start to put themselves into order, right? If you process enough all the different emotions that you feel, the different traumas that you've experienced, the different aspects of your personality, they will start to actually heal. It happens, right? So we can, as therapists, as good therapists, give techniques that help quicken the process, that make it easier. But it's like one of the reasons why, whether it's ChatGPT, Google Online, or any therapist that you go to, they're probably going to recommend at a certain point journaling, because it's so helpful for us to not only process, write down, but also observe, and how we start to put into concrete form our thoughts and feelings in a way that better help us understand us. So that's kind of what happens to the order of things. This is all, I'm now realizing why am I getting all philosophical? It's because I got the Brahman question. So I was talking about mythology and these identities that are not meant to be linear, binary, where it's on or off, but meant to be understand more nuanced and psychologically flexible. And so when we're trying to be ourselves and we're trying to be aware of ourselves as deeply as possible, if we just silence the self-critic for a minute and explore with curiosity rather than judgment our reactions, our emotions, our processes, we actually find that they naturally start to come more in align with our values, not less. So the fear is, I'm only a decent human being because I'm managing myself very tightly. And there is a dangerous way to do this. Like, you could create exploration outside of your values and do a lot of harm, right? That is something that happens, right? That we're trying to explore all these aspects of ourselves in a way that we're not judging and we're curious, but that doesn't mean we give power to and just let it do whatever it wants to do. We still want to have guardrails on. I'm getting way out there. I think I'm getting too far out there right now. But Descartes. I had a funny interaction years ago where I was having this conversation with someone, and they were very well educated, and I would not say I'm very well educated. Since then, I got my master's degree, but even besides that, I'm an independent studier. So a lot of the stuff that I studied about philosophy was just, I found it fascinating and I read the books. So I read multiple books by Rene Descartes. And I was talking about Rene Descartes at a party, and at a certain point, this guy goes, "Do you mean Rene Descartes?" And I'm like, maybe. I don't know. I don't speak French. Like, I don't know how to say his name. But it's like everyone was laughing at me. And I was the only one who had read the books. But he talks about in Methods this idea of building a worldview based on logic alone. And he talks about it as this metaphor for destroying his house. But he says, as you destroy your house, you have to have somewhere that you are, as a shelter, staying in the meantime, right? As you rebuild. And so that is, what we try to do with still holding on to certain values that we're going to assume, certain values that we're going to hold as unquestioning, which is often why the value-driven approach and doing value work first can be very helpful in this process. Do you recommend just journaling and letting it go, or would you go back and reread your words to see how you have maybe processed certain things? I think it's great to reread things, and I think it can be done in different ways. But it's not bad reading. Now, every once in a while, you want to go further back, but reading the day before and then processing the next day, and then reading the day before and then processing the next day, and having that be the pattern. And then, like, every once in a while, flipping to a random section and reading that just to get perspective can be a really good exercise. This is why rating our daily 10-step can be so powerful. It's just a different way of journaling, I think that is what the person meant to say. Yes. And so what the 10-step is, and I'm not going to remember, I have to Google the exact word, but it's a spot check inventory. Essentially, it's making sure that we are staying aligned with our values. And I mean, my very quick step 10 was live your values, don't manage outcomes, is kind of my mantra that I would say to myself. Okay, step 10 language, AA. 12 steps. Okay, I'm gonna have to do this slow way. Okay, here we go. Continue to take a personal inventory, and when we were promptly wrong, admit it. That wasn't actually I was thinking of a longer explanation of it that I read somewhere, probably in the big book. But anyway, So that's the spot check. Am I living my values? Am I doing what matters? What's cooler than celebrating Father's Day? Celebrating Father's Day with you. I'm assuming. Awesome, thanks. Yeah, in terms of your question about journaling, no problem. Happy to help. I'm glad we got the questions. We don't wait till the end of the hour next time, but those are questions that I love. So that really does feed this chat. But with that said, we are at the end of the hour, so I'm going to close this off today. Celebrating Father's Day with all of you. I guessed it right. I love you. I love all you guys. Thank you for those who did participate in the chat. I really do appreciate it. I'm going to try to keep doing this. So next Sunday, same bat time, same bat channel. And hope it was helpful. Feel free to give me feedback. A lot of you know me, and so feel free to let me know what you want to talk about. And if you don't feel comfortable, and if you do have my number, you can always text me during the chats, more private thing, and I will keep confidentiality as best I can while we tackle all these different topics. All right. Have a great week. See you next week, guys.